I finished cleaning up and went to say goodnight to my younger brothers. But as soon as I entered their room, I was dumbfounded. The windows were open, and the twins were nowhere to be found. Ted, Mike, where are you? In a panic, I searched the room. Empty! My God, had my brothers been kidnapped? It sounded crazy, but I just saw a video yesterday about sectarians who steal children. Terrified, I ran for the phone. I had to call the police as soon as possible. I was about to dial the number when I heard a rustle in the room. I flew in there and couldn't believe my eyes. Ted and Mike were lying quietly in their beds. Was this a prank? My heart almost broke. You can't do that. But my brothers said they had been here all the time. You didn't look good, sis. Ted winked at me. Very strange. Maybe I really didn't notice. I guess I worried too much about them. I hadn't taken my eyes off since our mom died of cancer a year ago. I remember that the last time we met, she squeezed my hand and said in a barely audible voice, "Take care of the boys." Our dad began to disappear even more at work to feed us. Then I realized I should support him and replace our mom. I even had to forget about the desire to become a teacher and take a sabbatical to fully take care of my brothers. The next morning, I decided to treat the boys with our mom's pancakes. It may not be the most healthy breakfast, but this was how the twins would remember our mom's care. In addition, Dad went on a business trip again, and even on the eve of the holiday. So today, I was for both parents. Mike, Ted, it's all set. I called to my brothers. But there was no answer. It was strange. Then I went upstairs and looked into the room. There was no one inside. Were my brothers pranking me again? I looked around in disbelief. There was an old book lying on the table. It was stained with something red. I stepped closer. Oh my God, it was blood. At that moment, I was really worried. I looked for my brothers all over the house. But they were nowhere to be found. What if they were stolen for real this time? In a panic, I started calling Ted and Mike's classmates, but no one saw them. It was Sunday. Exactly. I got caught up. It was as if something had snapped inside me. I called the police, but they said that my brothers were probably just out for a walk. No, you don't understand. I saw the blood. They're in danger. But the desk sergeant said that I could announce about the disappearance only in a day. Fighting back tears, I ran outside. I looked for my brothers in all the neighborhoods, knocked on the houses of friends, but no one knew anything. I had already visited all their favorite places, but the brothers were nowhere to be found. I had been looking for them all day. It was already dark. In desperation, I collapsed on a bench and burst into tears. How could I let this happen? Completely heartbroken, I trudged home, and then I noticed a shadow in the window of my brothers. I ran as fast as I could, and I saw Ted and Mike calmly reading comics. Lying in bed. The boys greeted me and asked casually when we were going to have dinner. I almost died of excitement. Where had they been and why were they pranking me again? But the twins looked at me like I was crazy. They'd been home all day. My head went blank. Apparently, I was really losing my mind. But that blood on the book, surely I wasn't imagining it. At breakfast, I asked the guys what kind of book it was, but the brothers said they didn't know what I was talking about, and they left the table and said they had to go to school. They were clearly not telling me something or even wanted to hide something from me. Determined, I went up to my brother's room. They must have hidden the book somewhere, but it was nowhere to be found. And suddenly there were footsteps on the stairs. Oh my God, were they thieves? In a panic, I tried to hide in the closet, but there were too many clothes there. Heck, the footsteps were very close. At the last moment, I ran to the bed and ducked under it. At the same moment, someone entered the room and 2 pairs of feet approached the bed. I froze with fear, but suddenly I heard the voices of my brothers. They were arguing about something. I was about to get out and scold them for their truancy, but then I heard Ted say, "Mike, if we don't give the money back today, we're screwed." I was wary. What was he talking about? And then suddenly there was a loud sound. Something broke. A shard from the piggy bank flew under the bed, and the brothers began to collect coins from the floor. Man, if they turned around, they would see me. But the guy silently collected all the money and quickly ran away. I was terrified. Was someone extorting money from my brothers? I crawled out from under the bed and quickly ran outside. I wanted to call out to my brothers, but I realized that if they were intimidated, they would definitely not tell me anything. So I carefully began to watch them from a distance. I had to protect them. After a couple of blocks, the brothers turned a sharp corner and entered a dark alley. There were only garbage cans and dirty walls of houses around. And what did the brothers forget in this place? Hiding behind one of the cans, I saw the brothers stop and stand at the shabby door. A guy in a white robe opened the door. God, who is this? Ted and Mike handed him the money, and he let them go inside, making a strange gesture with his hand. No, don't go in there. It's some kind of sect. But the brothers stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind them. Trying to stop myself from shaking, I ran after them and pounded on the door with all my might. The door opened. The same sectarian stood on the threshold. He asked me menacingly what I wanted. Out of fear, I blurted out that I was new. I was afraid he'd throw me out. But the guy said grimly, "Come on in." When I went downstairs, I found myself in a basement hall with many doors. There were candles all around, and there were strange noises coming out of the gloom, as if something was bubbling. Were they brewing some kind of potion? I need to get my brothers out of here. Suddenly, a woman ran out of one of the doors in tears. Falling to her knees in front of me, she screamed that she had ruined everything. I helped her up, but the robed man immediately grabbed her and dragged her somewhere. Oh no, what were they going to do with her? I rushed to the door where she was taken, but some sectarian blocked my path. What if my brothers were there too? In anger, I grabbed the sectarian by the robe and began to shout, "I want them back!" But he coldly replied that the brothers would work out their order. What order? What was happening? In a panic, I began to rush around the hall and pull all the doors. They were closed. Ted, Mike, answer me please. The sectarian started toward me. He was almost upon me. But then one of the doors gave way. Flinging it open, I flew into the room and was taken aback. The robed men were standing around a huge cauldron. The sectarians noticed me and moved towards me in a frightening manner. Don't do that! I huddled in a corner. There was nowhere to run. You shouldn't be here, said one of them. Then they grabbed me by the arms and dragged me somewhere. I desperately tried to escape, but in the end, I was thrown out into the street. Let me in! My brothers are there. In tears, I pounded on the unfortunate door, but no one opened it for me. Suddenly, my phone rang in my pocket. It was our dad. He said he was flying in tonight to congratulate me. Man, I forgot. It was my birthday tomorrow. Dad asked anxiously how the boys were doing. I wanted to tell him everything. But if he found out that the guys disappeared because of my fault, he would never forgive me. Pretending to be happy, I lied that my brothers were at school and I was preparing food for the holiday table. Dad also asked me not to overwork. After all, the brothers were already grown and they needed to learn independence. I had time until the evening. I had to go to the police again. This time they would definitely believe me. With the last of my strength, I ran to the nearest police station and shouted to the officer, "My brothers were kidnapped by the sect. I saw it myself." The policeman promised to sort it out and sent me home. They would do everything. I went slowly towards the house when I suddenly felt someone gaze on me. I looked around. There was no one there, but I felt uneasy. I had already reached the house, but the feeling grew stronger. Just as I reached the door, I spun around and saw someone dart quickly into the bushes. But I caught a glimpse of the Black Hood. My God, it was a sectarian. He had tracked me down, and he was going to kill me as a witness. I quickly ran to the house and immediately burst in and locked the door. For defense, I grabbed the coat rack at the entrance. I won't just give up. Surprise! I heard a chorus of voices. I screamed and frightened immediately dropped the coat rack on the floor. Dad was standing in the hall in front of me, and Ted and Mike were smiling next to him. How glad I was to see my brothers safe and sound. I ran to them, overwhelmed with happiness, and hugged them tightly. But then the brothers looked at each other slyly. I immediately remembered everything and tried to look stern. So will you tell me what all this meant? And then the brothers confessed. They were just preparing a party for me. Wait, what about the blood on the book? The brothers smiled and explained that the book was an old collection of Mom's recipes. Mike decided to make a strawberry cake, but ruined everything and only smeared the cover with juice. At that moment, there was a knock on the door. I turned pale with fear, but Dad went to the door as if nothing had happened. I darted toward him. Stop! There's a sectarian! But it was too late. The man in the robe was already standing on the threshold. In a panic, I rushed to my brothers and covered them with myself. I turned around. The cultist was gone. What was happening? The twins said that these guys were not sectarians. They were secret order of pastry chefs. These guys wanted to stand out in the confectionery world, so they chose such an unusual uniform. They have the best cakes in town. Ted said proudly, and the most expensive ones. He added, so the brothers had to work out the price of the cake by sweeping the floors. At that moment, the guy from the order returned with a huge cake. Wow. It was made of white chocolate. I was ready to cry with happiness. You guys tried so hard to make me feel good. Dad invited the cook to celebrate with us. But he referred to urgent business and was about to leave when I remembered the woman who had been sobbing in the basement. Who was she? The cook looked at me intently, but then he smiled. That woman visited their courses. It's just that some people are very worried if they don't succeed at first. I suddenly felt embarrassed for my suspicions. I should trust people more. And I had to drop the charges today. Surprisingly, during the evening, the brothers took care of me and Dad just like adults. Maybe I really shouldn't have worried so much. And Dad was right. They had grown up and could take care of themselves. After all, I have a life of my own. Which means it's time to give my brothers more freedom. And it's high time for me to go back to university. Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you. I was lying on the examination couch, and the doctor was running the ultrasound sensor over my stomach. If only everything would work out. But suddenly, the doctor stopped and looked at me in horror. My heart was pounding, and then the doctor breathed out. Your child is a demon. My heart sank. My vision blurred. No, not that. I didn't even think about getting pregnant before. In high school, I had the love of my life. Hero. I thought nothing could separate us, but then I found out that he cheated on me. It was a big blow. And I couldn't trust the guys anymore. Because of that incident, I turned into a wild child. I hung out endlessly and changed guys like socks. But one day, my life changed dramatically. I met Fred and I really fell in love. Of course, at first, I denied it and thought we were going to have an affair for a couple of weeks. But Fred wasn't like the other guys. He took care of me, always helped me, and never once let me doubt his loyalty. He wasn't interested in anyone but me. I tried to distance myself, but Fred kept asking me out, making me feel better with little things. And I didn't even know I was falling madly in love. So, instead of a couple of weeks, we met for 6 months, and I could not imagine life without Fred. Only with him did I truly feel happy. After my dates with Fred, I traditionally met with my friend Lara. We went to college together and she knew everything about me. So, the day after Fred and I celebrated our 6-month anniversary, I went to the cafe to meet Lara. I told her in detail that Fred had given me a surprise. He had arranged a picnic on the embankment. He ordered my favorite Italian food, the best wine. And then, when we were talking, he danced with me to the singing of street musicians. It was so romantic. But for most of the story, Lara was interrupting me. She always did so. She wondered what kind of movies Fred liked, what kind of wine he drank. I stopped paying attention to it a long time ago. But when I finished speaking, Lara suddenly declared that Fred was not a match for me at all. I almost choked on what I heard and stared at her in shock. What do you mean? Lara told me that Fred was a womanizer. And I was just a toy for him. He didn't love me. My jaw almost dropped. What made her think that? Fred was not a cheater, but Lara persisted, saying at the first opportunity Fred would run away to another woman. I couldn't take it anymore and shouted at Lara to shut up. Fred and I had been together for a long time and we loved each other, to which Lara said that we would break up anyway and left. I was completely lost. What happened to my friend? We had never had a fight before. And why would Lara think Fred was a womanizer? I went to college the next day, hoping to make up with Lara, but she was nowhere to be found. Strange. Maybe she was sick. I went to my locker, thinking, and froze. It was as if someone had poked the lock open. I quickly opened the locker and all things were in place. But then my eyes fell on the white envelope. I didn't remember ever having one. There was a note in it and a pregnancy test. Unused. I didn't understand anything and quickly read the note. Someone was congratulating me on my pregnancy. What an idiotic joke. I slammed my locker shut and decided to order a pizza in the dining room. My favorite food always calmed me down, but as soon as I ate a piece, I almost threw up. What the hell? I loved Italian food. Then I remembered the note from the locker and the test. I shivered. What if it was not a joke? I looked down at my stomach. It seemed that something moved inside. Oh no. Dropping the pizza, I dashed back to the locker and pulled out the test. My heart was pounding as I ran to the bathroom. I needed to find out now. While I waited for the result, I mentally prayed, don't let it be 2 bars. I squeezed my eyes shut and examined, looking at the test, and at the same moment, my heart sank. This was not a joke. I was pregnant. What should I do now? How would Fred react? Terrible thoughts came to my mind at once. What if Lara was right and he left me right away? I walked out of the bathroom with the test in my hand, my shoulders sagging, and suddenly I ran into Lara. She gave me a quick look and said sarcastically that I put on some weight. Had your stomach grown? A chill ran down my spine. I hid the test behind my back and ran to the exit. Someone found out I was pregnant before I did. I couldn't believe it. But I was even more worried about Fred. Lara's words were still ringing in my head. He'll leave you at the first opportunity. Tears welled up in my eyes. No, I needed to confirm everything. The tests can be wrong. I immediately Googled the nearest clinic and rushed there. The doctor saw me right away, and so I lay on the couch, and the doctor declared that my future child was a demon. I couldn't believe it. And I was crying openly. How was that even possible? It was like a nightmare. As if hearing my thoughts, the doctor showed me the ultrasound. It became harder to breathe. Instead of a child, there was a little devil with horns and a tail. My vision immediately went dark. I almost fainted, and the doctor immediately put ammonia to my nose. The sharp smell brought me back to my senses, but it didn't make me feel any better. My child was a demon. And the doctor only carefully added that now emotional stress was not recommended. I could hurt the baby. I didn't want a baby, especially a monster. My eyes immediately filled with tears. I quietly asked if I could have an abortion, but the doctor shook his head, only with the permission of the child's father. I was terribly depressed, and I was terribly afraid to tell Fred about the pregnancy. After all, I was sure he would leave me, but was there any other way? I sobbed. No. Fred had to find out. With trembling hands, I dialed him and asked him to meet me in the park across the clinic. The wait was terrible. I imagined how Fred would react to the news of the pregnancy, and I almost cried. On top of that, I was shaking all over. Fred would leave me. Lara was right. When Fred arrived, he looked terribly excited and immediately gave me a protective hug, asking me what was wrong and why I was so pale. I looked into his eyes and could not utter it. My heart was pounding, and I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. Come with me. Gathering my thoughts, I blurted out, I'm pregnant, and then I looked down. I felt like the silence lasted forever. But Fred suddenly lifted my face by the chin and gently said that this was great news. He was smiling. Oh, Fred, that's not all. Our baby is a monster. Fred immediately froze and asked, is this a joke? No, Fred, this isn't a joke. The doctor showed me the image. Our child is a real demon. I did not notice how I burst into tears, but Fred suddenly shook my hand firmly and snapped, we're going back to the hospital. I asked why. But Fred didn't seem to notice me. Did he still want to have an abortion? I sobbed again. When we got to the reception desk, Fred asked us to see another doctor for some reason, but the receptionist said they didn't do that. But Fred was insistent. Apparently, he did not want this child so much that he demanded the director of the clinic. And so I was lying on the couch, and the doctor was again running the ultrasound sensor over my stomach. Without saying a word, Fred stared intently at the monitor, and then the doctor said that I would have no monster. I immediately jumped. Is my child normal? But the doctor just shook his head. There was no baby at all. I was not pregnant. I stared in shock, but half an hour ago, another doctor confirmed my pregnancy. Fred suddenly dropped his head, clearly upset. So he wanted me to be pregnant? Fred, you didn't want me to have an abortion, did you? Fred looked at me in horror. Of course no. I just wanted to make sure. I wanted to see our baby. There was no baby. What was going on here anyway? I felt dizzy. Okay, that's enough. I needed to get some air. I jumped up and went into the corridor, but stopped at the turn. Lara was standing around the corner. I immediately crouched, carefully peeking out. What was she doing here? And suddenly Lara turned around. At the last second, I flattened myself against the wall. If only she didn't notice. I stood there for a while not breathing. Finally, I heard Lara's soft voice. That was close. But who was she talking to? I peeked around the corner and saw that Lara was holding something out to the doctor. I looked closer. Oh my god. It was the doctor who told me about the monster baby. Lara handed the doctor an envelope, thanking him for his help. She's not worthy of a guy like Fred. He should be mine. I was in shock. How could Lara do this to me? Because of her, I got through this living nightmare. I thought that I would lose everything. And this was because of jealousy? I was literally exploding inside, and I couldn't take it anymore. I came around the corner and shouted to Lara that I'd heard everything. I expected remorse. But Lara suddenly grinned maliciously and said that in any case, Fred was hers now. He loved me anyway after the news about the monster baby. I was about to answer her when Fred came up behind me and gently put his arm around my waist. He didn't even look at Lara. He just said, "I will never leave you. You are my family." He was not at all afraid of my pregnancy. But on the contrary, Fred suggested that we thought about a baby as beautiful as me. I was moved by his words. We smiled at each other and looked at Lara, who was red with anger. She ran out into the street in a rage, and Fred bent down and kissed me. And at that moment, all the bad things seemed to disappear. One kiss from Fred made me feel like the happiest person in the world. This story only confirmed that he was my true love. A year has passed since that incident, and now Fred and I have a baby, and he is the most beautiful baby in the world, not all like a monster. Although sometimes he does not let us sleep at night. I don't hold a grudge against Lara, because if it wasn't for her, we wouldn't have Billy. But since then, I choose my friends much more carefully. After all, a true friend will never plot against you. Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you. The judge said that the decision was made and gavelled. That day, I adopted my boyfriend, Joe. We both had to stop ourselves from laughing. He really didn't have a mom. She died 2 years ago in some sort of bathroom accident. We went out on the street and Joe happily announced that I was now his mom, and we burst out laughing. Since childhood, I adopted risk and dangerous challenges. It was boring to live without it. I tried to find an extreme sports fan like me, but Joe was so crazy that sometimes it was scary. But I definitely wasn't bored with him. Therefore, our relationship quickly turned into a plain chicken. You know, we did everything. I once even walked without a safety net on the wire between the skyscrapers. And he, for example, could eat a live frog. Now, Joe asked me to adopt him as a dare. If I got through a month and was a good mom, I could give Joe the next task. But if one of us refused the challenge, they would have to walk naked all over the city, and I really didn't want that. After the adoption challenge, we went to a coffee shop to celebrate, and Joe offered to live together since I was his new mom now. I agreed. At first, we hung out all the time and I loved it. I had been wanting to move out of my parents' house for a long time, but every day Joe was acting more and more strangely. When I did yoga, he would sit next to me and watch. I was cooking in the kitchen. He was sitting silently at the table. Even when I lingered in the bathroom, he would knock softly on the door and say, "I think it's time for mommy to go out. Joe misses you." Oh no, Joe, you won't be able to get me off balance. I won't fail the challenge. One morning, I was getting ready for work and had just opened the door from my room when I saw Joe sitting in front of it. He was looking at me. I smiled and was about to leave when Joe grabbed my leg and told that mom should stay at home with her son. I didn't know. Joe was such a good actor. I played along, hugged him gently, and said, "Joe, mommy needs to earn you some candy bars." Then he turned away and said viciously that I was acting just like his dead mother. I didn't think it was funny anymore. I ran quickly down the stairs, and I thought I heard Joe crying somewhere behind me. Flying into the office, I ran into my friend Eve. She suggested we go to the bar tonight. Yes, a little relaxation would definitely help. Joe was beginning to bother me. At the bar, even I talked to the bikers. The guys offered to give us a ride. Oh yes, that's what I need. We left the bar. I got on one of the bikes with a big guy, and the race started. We raced through the city, and I felt happy. Not for long though. When I pulled out my cell phone, I saw 35 missed calls from Joe. Damn, what if something happened? I immediately asked the biker to take me home. As I entered the hall, I saw Joe sitting in the dark on the stairs. He slowly stood up and began to approach me. I was scared, and he stared into my eyes and clenched his fist. He hissed that mommy shouldn't be home so late. I answered him with disbelief. You're out of your mind because of this challenge. But Joe suddenly grabbed my hand and squeezed it so hard that I screamed. I thought he was going to break it. But Joe jerked back and almost burst into tears. He began to apologize for being selfish, and his mother was right to scold him for it. What? I didn't scold anyone. Joe vowed to be better and trudged back to his room, constantly repeating the words, Mom, sorry. I locked myself in and decided to dial Eve. I felt uneasy and decided to tell her all about Joe's antiques. Eve said it sounded like Joe really had some kind of mental problem. This was no longer a simple challenge. She advised me to leave as soon as possible. Who knows what else he might be capable of? Her words made me uneasy. I used to think Joe was just good at acting, but now I was starting to doubt it. I knocked on Joe's door. Silence. Summoning my resolve, I said that we would need to finish this game. I was terribly worried, and I was waiting for him to tell me that I would have to go naked all over the city. But Joe suddenly opened the door and started hugging me. Joe, what are you doing? Mommy, don't go. Don't leave Joe alone. He continued. Then I put my hand on his shoulder and said softly, Joe, this is just a game. You're worrying too much. But then Joe stopped talking and pulled away. A sinister smile slowly spread across his face. Joe, stop it. This isn't funny anymore, okay? I was about to leave when Joe grabbed my arm and whispered that I was a bad mom. Let me go. I broke free and ran out of the room, heading for the stairs. I kept looking back at the distraught Joe. He followed me slowly. I was running downstairs, but suddenly I tripped and fell down. My vision went dark. I woke up in my bed. I was wearing a nightgown and Joe was carefully adjusting the blanket. I half froze. But he looked at me intently and put me back down. I'll take care of Mommy, Joe said slowly. The words sent a shiver down my spine. With a trembling voice, I asked for water. When he left, I frantically searched for my phone. Fortunately, it rang on the nightstand. I saw the number on the screen. It was Eve. But before I could pick up the phone, I heard Joe's voice. Well. He came over, took the cell phone, and threw it at the wall. The impact made me wince. If Joe broke my phone so easily, what could he do to me? Then Joe whispered that Mommy should think about her behavior. Then he went out and the key turned in the lock. Joe locked me up. I immediately ran to the door and started pounding on it with my fists and pulling on the handle, but to no avail. Can I escape through the window? But then I noticed that Joe had taken the handles off the windows. I started to panic, and suddenly I heard the roar of an engine. Eve's car appeared under the windows. She got out of the car and rang the doorbell. This was my chance to escape. I knocked on the window and actively waved my hands. Come on, Eve, look up. At that moment, Joe came out to Eve, smiling. Eve was worried about why I wasn't picking up the phone, but Joe said in a sweet voice that I wasn't feeling well and I was sleeping. I was banging on the window and I was hoping that Eve would look up after all, but she just shrugged her shoulders and went to the car. I felt doomed. Help me! I yelled in hysterics. Suddenly, the door to the room opened. Joe grabbed me by the hair and dragged me to the bed and handcuffed me, saying that his mother was behaving very badly. I screamed and struggled, but Joe just patted my head and told me that soon Mommy would calm down and he would live again as before and always be together. Joe came out and I was still twitching and screaming for help. I wanted to cry. I loved extreme sports, but this was too much. What should I do? Joe was a real nutcase. He didn't play, but then an idea came to me. What if I played along? When Joe came to check on me, I told him I'd figured it out. Mom promises to take care of Joe if he will be obedient and take the handcuffs off. My voice was shaking and my heart was ready to jump out of my chest. Joe thought for a moment, then finally released me and ordered me to feed him. Oh my God, it really worked. We went to the kitchen and I started making him porridge. I looked at Joe and gave him a tight smile. Then I handed him a plate. Joe was very happy, but as soon as he tasted the porridge, he got terribly angry, threw the plate into the wall, and started shouting at me, "You're making porridge with lumps again." I was so scared. "Joe, this is the first time I've made it." But he stared at me and told that Mommy had already made Joe's porridge with lumps. They then had a big fight. His mom fell down and fell asleep in the bathroom forever. What? Fell asleep? Then Joe got up from the table and started walking toward me. Damn, and then I realized Joe had killed his mother. I blurted out that I was going to the bathroom. There I closed the flimsy latch and looked around. Damn it. I had to get out of here. Then I noticed a small window near the ceiling. I tried to open it, but at that moment, the door creaked. Joe was rushing to me, saying in a crazy voice that Mom was too late again. In a fit of hysteria, I tried to smash the window with a mop, but at that moment, Joe burst in and started shouting. He wanted Mommy to play with him. Tears welled up in my eyes. That's it. I'll never get out of here unless... Then I hugged Joe with trembling arms. Mommy had already made up a game for us. "Joe, you're a brave boy, aren't you?" He nodded thoughtfully. "Prove it to your mom. Take a walk on the ledge of the roof for your mom." "Can you?" In horror, I waited for his answer, but he was suddenly happy and agreed. Joe climbed out of the window and onto the ledge, and I watched him. "Come on, Joe. Mommy is proud of you." He looked at me with a smile, and I immediately closed the window and ran downstairs. Without looking back, I hurried to the police station. Tears streamed down my cheeks. The cops listened to me, and we drove back to the house. But when we entered, I was speechless. Joe was covered in bruises and torn clothes. At the sight of the police, he began to cry and pointed at me. "Please don't give me to her." Joe complained that I adopted him just to mock him, and even made him walk on the ledge. I interrupted him and started shouting, "No way! Don't believe him! He wanted to kill me!" I was so hurt. Of course the cops believed Joe. He played so well. They said that I was deprived of the right to custody and took me to the police station. When they let me go, I went to see Eve. I flinched at every sound, afraid that Joe would attack me. But Joe was gone, and he didn't even show up for the trial, where I was fined and given community service. On the last day of my punishment, I returned to Eve with the news that I was moving to another city. I admitted that no matter where I was afraid every day that Joe would attack me down there.
And now I have been living a normal life without adrenaline for 6 months, and I gradually forget those terrible events.
I have a job, an apartment, and even a new boyfriend. I was just on my way to a date when I stopped at a traffic light. Suddenly, I saw Joe across the street. He gave me a friendly wave. I was petrified with horror. I knew that the light would turn green, and he would come to me. But a bus passed him. A second later, there was no one on the opposite street. I ran as fast as I could. Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you.